I don't even know where to begin. But if you're listening to this, I ask you to pay close attention because I don't usually talk about these things. My name is Ethan, and what I'm about to share with you haunted me for years. There are still nights when I wake up drenched in sweat, remembering that time I came closer to death than I'd ever want to admit. I'm not a dangerous person or anything like that, but ever since I was young, I had this urge to leave my mark in places no one else dared to go. I was passionate about graffiti, not for others to see, but for the simple satisfaction of knowing I had been there, in forgotten corners where only silence and rust stood as witnesses. You might think it's foolish, or that what happened was my fault, and maybe you're right. But what I saw that night, it shook everything I believed in. And the worst part is, to this day, I have no idea who was there or why they did what they did. All I know is that I stopped painting after that, and every time I walk near abandoned train tracks, my heart pounds like crazy. If you love horror stories, I invite you to subscribe and turn on the bell, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just any story. It's something that could happen to anyone if they're not careful. Back then, I lived near a quiet town in Kansas, in a neighborhood without much excitement. I was always searching for something more, something that made me feel alive. And that's how I ended up, along with my best friend Jake, in one of the strangest and most dangerous places I've ever known. I thought it would be just another night, one of those that end with a couple of empty cans and laughs between friends. But that night, nothing went the way we expected. All of this started from a simple curiosity, a sudden urge to find a new spot to leave my mark. But what I discovered changed me forever. It all began one afternoon while I was scrolling through some maps on my phone, looking for some hidden spot, something untouched by the usual tags. That's when I stumbled across an old stretch of tracks on the outskirts of Omaha, where, according to the images, there was an abandoned freight train. The thought of painting there in the middle of nowhere seemed perfect. I sent Jake a message, and as always, he didn't hesitate to join me. It wasn't so much about the graffiti for him, but more because he was always up for anything to break the routine. Around 9:30 at night, I picked him up and we headed out. The city faded behind us, and the farther we drove, the more I felt that strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The road was deserted, lined with trees and empty lots. When we arrived, we parked far away just in case. We walked about 15 minutes until we found the tracks. There it was, just like I saw on the map, a rusted, lifeless train standing still in the darkness. The air felt heavy, but I didn't think much of it at the time. All I could focus on was how amazing it would be to leave my art there. Jake lit a cigarette while I pulled my cans out of the backpack. "You sure no one comes around here?" he asked, half joking, half serious. "Relax, there's not a soul out here," I replied, not knowing how wrong I was. I approached the first car, and the surface was so clean it surprised me. It was strange that no one had tagged it before. I started with my first signature, while Jake sat a few feet away, calmly smoking and watching. The silence was complete, except for the hiss of the spray and the occasional crunch of leaves under our feet. After a few minutes, I stepped back to admire the result. Not bad. Actually, I liked how it looked against the old train's backdrop. I felt proud. Without wasting time, I moved on to the next car. At that moment, everything seemed normal. It felt like any other night out, one of the many we had experienced. But there was something hard to explain, a feeling like we were being watched. And right then, when I thought everything was under control, things began to turn strange, something that still gives me chills today. I kept painting slowly, enjoying every line, every stroke I laid on the cold, worn-out metal of the train. I felt in my element, cut off from everything. My mind focused solely on the texture of the surface and how the colors came to life. There was something special about that place, like time had stopped, like no one had set foot there in years. Jake wasn't saying much, just moving around, smoking, throwing in a joke now and then to break the silence. I barely responded, completely absorbed. I finished the second tag and stepped back. I stopped to look at what I had created. It wasn't perfect, but it had character. It was mine, and that was enough. The night was cool, and though there was no wind, the atmosphere had that stillness that makes you think. Jake sat on a nearby rock and tossed me one of the empty cans he had with him. "Here, in case you want to keep going," he said with a grin. I grabbed the can and thanked him, though I already felt I was about done. Maybe just one more and we'd leave. The train, stretching into the darkness, seemed endless. I moved toward another car, a bit farther down, and started getting ready for the last tag of the night. As I shook the can, I heard the familiar rattle of the metal balls inside, that sound that always calmed me. That's when I noticed something. We'd been there for almost half an hour, and everything had been too quiet, too perfect. There was no sign of anyone, not even animals roaming around. Just us and the train. I paused for a moment and looked around. I didn't see anything unusual, but I couldn't shake the unease. I kept painting, trying to push those thoughts away. When I finished, I stepped back and looked at my work one last time. The 3 tags looked good together. They had a harmony that made me feel satisfied. I tossed the last empty can toward where we had come in, just for the sound of it hitting the rails. I liked that sound. It gave me a sense of closure, like the night was complete. But as soon as the echo of the can faded, something changed. A faint creak, barely audible, echoed in the distance. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me turn my head. Jake heard it too, because I saw him stand up suddenly, his eyes fixed in the direction the sound had come from. We stood in silence, alert, trying to figure out what it was. It could have been anything, but at that moment, neither of us was sure of anything. We looked at each other for a second, saying nothing, like we were waiting for the other to say it was nothing. But the silence grew heavier, more uncomfortable. Jake asked me quietly if I heard that, and I just nodded. The sound didn't come again, and for a moment, we tried convincing ourselves it was just the can bouncing off something. Even so, I couldn't help but feel the back of my neck start to sweat. I had that strange feeling that something was off, but I tried not to show it. "Want to stay a bit longer?" Jake asked, trying to hide his unease. "I don't know. Maybe we've had enough for tonight," I replied, putting away the cans I still had left. We stayed there, standing still, looking around. The shadows cast by the trees, and the train seemed longer, denser. There was no wind, but the air felt colder. Suddenly, a second sound snapped us out of our thoughts. This time, much clearer. A metallic bang, sharp, louder than before, and it came from deep within the train. My heart raced. Jake looked at me, and I could see in his eyes he felt the same. It wasn't an animal or the wind. Someone was there. We didn't say anything, but our bodies were already tense, ready to run if we had to. We tried listening for more, but everything went quiet again. The darkness was so thick we couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. My breathing grew heavier, and I felt my hands start to shake. Then something fell near us. A can. One of mine. It couldn't have rolled there on its own. Someone had thrown it. My mind tried to come up with a logical explanation, but none of them made sense. I looked at Jake, and he was already stepping back. That's when a deep voice broke the silence. "You don't belong here." It was like time stopped. I couldn't see who spoke, but the tone, the way it was said, it wasn't a warning. It was a threat. My legs moved before my mind could catch up, and without a word, I started running. Jake was right behind me, and as we ran, I heard that voice shouting something else, something that chilled me to the bone. "I told you to get the hell out of here." I didn't dare look back. All I could hear were Jake's footsteps and the pounding of my heart in my ears, and then the sound I'll never forget, a gunshot. Loud, sharp, way too close. The echo of that shot rang in my head like time had frozen. I felt this emptiness in my chest, like all the air had been ripped from me, but my legs didn't stop. We ran along the tracks, no direction, no plan, just desperate to get as far from that place as we could. The sound of our shoes crunching the gravel, the ragged breath from both of us, it all blended with this raw fear I've rarely felt in my life. I don't know how long we ran, but my legs were burning and my thoughts were gone. replaced by the instinct to survive. I heard a voice behind us, yelling something that hit me like a hammer. "You better not trip, boy." That line, spat out with so much rage, made it clear this wasn't just a warning. He wanted to hurt us. This wasn't some joke. Seconds later, another shot. This one sounded farther away, but close enough for Jake to stumble and almost fall. I screamed at him not to stop, to keep going, that we were nearly at the road. I didn't look back, not once, because something inside me knew that if I hesitated, we wouldn't make it out alive. We reached the spot where the tracks crossed a small side road, dimly lit by a flickering old street lamp. We only stopped when our bodies gave out, hunched over, gasping, our hearts pounding so hard I thought mine would burst. We looked at each other, and I saw the same terror in Jake's eyes that I felt. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. We both knew that night had scarred us. We walked to the car in complete silence. Neither of us wanted to break it, maybe afraid that saying it out loud would make it all more real. My hands still shook as I fumbled with the keys and started the engine. The drive home was filled with nothing but the hum of the car and our heavy breathing. Part of me wanted to go straight to the police, tell them everything. But how? We had been there doing something illegal, tagging an abandoned train. Who would believe us? What could they do if we didn't even know who shot at us? I swallowed my words and stayed quiet, thinking that maybe, by not talking about it, I could forget it faster. But I didn't. Tap the yellow lamp icon and stay with us, so together we can uncover disturbing mysteries. Days passed, and even though I tried to get on with my life, the image of that night, the voice, the echo of that gunshot, stayed with me. I kept wondering who that person was, why he was there, and what would have happened if we'd arrived just a little later, or if we hadn't run. After that night, something shifted in me. I couldn't sleep well for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that shot again, that man's voice bouncing around in my head, and the fear, so real, kept me awake. More than once I'd wake in the middle of the night, convinced someone was outside coming for me. But there was never anyone. Just me and that silence, now my constant shadow. Jake and I didn't talk about what happened for several days. It was like we both were trying to bury the memory, pretend it never happened. But the weight of that experience was too much to ignore. When we finally saw each other again, it was strange. We looked at each other, and just a glance was enough to know we were still the same, carrying the same fear. We sat at the park where we used to hang out, and finally, I let out the question that had been eating me alive. "Do you think that guy really wanted to kill us?" Jake looked down, thinking, and after a few seconds he answered, "I don't know." But he wasn't playing. His answer was enough to confirm what I already felt. That wasn't random. That wasn't just someone messing with us. We had come way too close to something serious, something dark. I thought about going to the police again, but every time I did, I hit the same wall. We had no proof, no names. We couldn't even describe who attacked us. What was I going to say? That we were out tagging trains and someone shot at us? No one would take that seriously. Slowly, life returned to something like normal. I went out less, avoided lonely places, and packed away my spray cans in a box I never opened again. But something inside me wasn't settled. I felt like I had left something unfinished. I couldn't get the image out of my head, my tags covered in red, like someone wanted to erase not just my art, but my very presence there. Weeks went by, and every day the need to understand what had happened grew stronger. I asked myself questions with no answers. Who was that man? What was he doing there? Why so much hate? What was inside that train that was so important no one could see it? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go back. I needed to see with my own eyes if everything was still the same, if it had all been real or just paranoia. But this time, I wasn't going unprepared. I made the decision one random morning. I woke up with this feeling in my chest, like something was pulling me back to that place. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jake. I knew he wouldn't let me go, and even though I doubted myself, something inside pushed me. I needed to know what was left, if everything was still there or if something more was hidden. I went ready. I packed a flashlight, my phone with plenty of battery, and yes, I took a gun that had belonged to my father, an old Pietro Beretta he used when he was young. It didn't make me feel braver, but at least it gave me some sense of security. I knew how to shoot, though I'd never had to do it outside a range. I waited until daylight. I wasn't making the same mistake of going back in the dark. I left early and drove the same route to the outskirts of Omaha, parking in the same spot we had before. The walk to the tracks felt longer, heavier. Each step reminded me of what I'd lived, of how it felt to run for my life. When I finally arrived, the train was still there, rusted, still, just as lonely as the first time. But something was different, something you could sense from far away. I approached carefully, alert to any sound. The silence was absolute, and the air had that damp smell that sticks to your clothes. I went straight to where I had made my marks. When I got there, my stomach twisted. My tags were gone. In their place, splashes of red paint covered everything, like someone had taken the time to erase every trace of what I did. But it wasn't a normal cover-up. The way the paint was spread was messy, rushed, like it had been done in anger. I touched the surface and felt the paint had dried days ago. Someone had come back shortly after we left, and they wanted to make sure I knew I wasn't welcome. I kept moving, flashlight in hand, though there was still enough daylight. I didn't see anyone, but every sound, every crunch of leaves under my feet made me whip around. I wasn't calm. Something told me I shouldn't be there, but I'd come too far to turn back. That's when I saw a car with its door open. Something inside me said the answer was there. I approached, breathing deep, and stepped through the doorway, never imagining what I was about to find. I stepped into the car, my heart pounding in my ears. The daylight barely filtered through the rusted slits, and the air was thick, like no one had breathed there in a long time. I turned on the flashlight even though I didn't need it, but having it on gave me a strange comfort, like the beam of light could somehow protect me. The first thing I noticed was the emptiness. The car was almost completely bare, but in the center, like some sort of altar, was an old wooden chair, its legs worn down, with marks showing it had been dragged. Around it, chains, some coiled, others loose, all covered in a thin layer of dust. They didn't seem to have been moved recently, but their presence chilled me to the bone. I stepped closer, not understanding why all of this was here. It made no sense. Who would put a chair and chains in the middle of an abandoned train car? But what hit me the hardest was the smell, a strong, unmistakable smell, like a room just scrubbed with bleach. The stench was so overwhelming, I had to cover my nose with my sleeve. I closed my eyes for a moment, and I swear, for a second, I felt like I was in a hospital. Or worse, in a place where someone had tried to erase something that wasn't meant to be found. I looked at the floor, searching for any clue, anything to tell me what had happened here, but there was nothing else, just the chair, the chains, and that stench twisting my stomach. I pulled out my phone. I wanted to take a picture, to document what I was seeing, maybe to show Jake, maybe just to prove to myself this wasn't my imagination. But just as I was about to take the picture, I heard a sound, a soft, metallic clang, faint but clear enough to freeze me in place. It came from the far end of the train, beyond the car I was in. I instinctively turned off the flashlight and stood still, listening. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same. Now it felt heavy, thick, as if something or someone was waiting. I couldn't see a thing, but I could feel it, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like when you know you're being watched. My mind started racing. What if he was back? What if he'd never left? My legs weakened, and a chill ran down my spine. I was alone, in the middle of nowhere, knowing for sure that I should never have come back. Without thinking, I stumbled out of the car, nearly tripping at the door, and started walking fast, almost running. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see. I just needed to get out of there as fast as I could. With every step I took away from that car, it felt like it wasn't enough. The air outside felt just as heavy as inside, like the very atmosphere refused to let me go in peace. I couldn't shake what I had seen. That chair, those chains, the stench of bleach clinging to everything. But most of all, that sound. It wasn't in my head. I moved a few yards along the tracks, the flashlight still off, too afraid to turn it on. I felt exposed, like something could jump out of the shadows at any moment. My steps quickened, but the path seemed to stretch endlessly, like the tracks themselves were holding me, forcing me to stay. Then something made me stop. I don't know if it was instinct or pure panic. I turned slowly, unwillingly but unable to help myself. And there, right at the entrance of the car I'd just left, I saw it. A figure, a silhouette, tall, still, staring at me. I couldn't see its face, but I didn't need to. Its presence was enough. I stood frozen for a few seconds, trying to convince myself it was just a shadow, a trick of the light. But it wasn't. That figure was real, and it knew I was there. Adrenaline surged through me, forcing me to move. I made myself take a step back, then another, never taking my eyes off that unmoving figure. When I finally managed to turn completely, I bolted. I didn't care about anything else. I just needed to get out. As I ran, I heard a sound that chilled me to the core. It wasn't footsteps or a shot, not even a voice. It was a scream. A howl that seemed to come from deep inside the tunnel, yet echoed like it was right next to me. A human scream, but with something else. Something wild, sick, indescribable. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I knew if I stopped, if I hesitated, I wouldn't make it. I ran harder than I ever had, my heart about to burst, that scream bouncing around in my head. I only stopped when my legs gave out, when I saw the road again, like salvation. I leaned against a post, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But nothing made sense. All I knew was that I had seen something I wasn't meant to see, and someone, or something, had made that very clear. I never went back there. After that day, I knew something inside me had broken. I couldn't sleep peacefully, couldn't be alone without reliving every detail of that experience. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that silhouette in the doorway, heard that scream, smelled the bleach like it was still on my clothes. I tried everything to leave it behind, to pretend it never happened, but it wasn't that easy. I told Jake what I saw, what I found. He didn't judge me, but he didn't want to hear more either. "Let it go," he said, with a seriousness I'd never seen in him before. I nodded, though deep down I knew letting it go wasn't an option. It was like a thorn stuck inside me, one I couldn't pull out, but couldn't forget either. I packed away the gun, the cans, everything that reminded me of that night, into a box I never opened again. I walked away from graffiti, from the tracks, from everything I used to love. None of it mattered anymore. Something was gone for good. Sometimes, walking through the city, I'd hear a train in the distance, and my heart would race like I was back there, running, escaping from something I still couldn't understand. I thought many times about telling this story, sharing it with someone, but I always stopped myself. Who would believe me? Who would understand what I felt? It wasn't just fear. It was deeper than that. It was knowing there are things that shouldn't be discovered, places we're not meant to be. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't run, if I had stayed to face whoever was there. But I'm not stupid. I know we barely saved our lives that night. And though I'll never know for sure what or who that figure was, I've learned that not everything has an answer. Sometimes it's better not to know. Years have passed, and though time has dulled the memories, there are still nights when I wake up sweating, that scream fresh in my ears. I still wonder what was in that car, why someone would keep a chair and chains there, why they tried so hard to erase me from that place with such anger. But those are questions I'll carry with me always, without answers. Today, by telling you this, I'm not looking for pity or attention. I just wanted to lighten the load a little, this weight I've carried since that night. Because even though I tried to leave it behind, this wound is still open. And maybe, by sharing it, I can finally begin to heal.